dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead.
You will recall that in my recent address to the United Nations General Assembly, I expressed concern of this government over the situation in Southeast Asia, particularly on the attacks on the people of South Vietnam.
Few moments throughout life trigger the memory of where you were the day the news trickled through.
We had, if you like, an event that, was normal. It was a parade, it was the president in an open-top car. You wouldn't do that these days, probably.
The assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963 remains a stain on political history. Its nature surrounded by controversy, mystery, and outrage. It is a day which remains etched in the history of the world, an unforgotten murder of a highly regarded former president.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The alleged act of one man rippled throughout the media. Was it a cover-up? Was there only a single shooter? Were higher powers in play that day? Observe the facts and sequences of this fateful day in Dallas, Texas, as we recount the moments where a figurehead became a martyr, minute by minute. Thursday, 21st November, 1963, 9 p.m. at 2515 5th Street, Irving, Texas. 31-year-old Ruth Payne is walking into her garage. Ruth is a friend of Marina Oswald. The light has been left on, which is unusual. It seems Marina's husband, Lee Harvey Oswald, had been working again and forgot to switch it off.
The official story says that one man, Lee Harvey Oswald, was somebody who had a grudge against the president. He had certainly Marxist leanings. He, well, on the surface at least, appeared to resent what had happened in Cuba, which he blamed Kennedy for.
In Cuba itself, the people have been exhorted by Castro to push back the invader, and 300,000 militiamen have been mobilized. The invasion was successful in its early hours, with Castro, of course, blaming the U.S. Is it the first chink in his armor?
At the start of his presidency, he's got pretty hardline views on foreign policy. So you have his attempt to overthrow Castro at the Bay of Pigs. So he launches the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. During the final year of the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1960, secret planning within the CIA for an overthrow of Castro was underway. And the basic idea of the plan was to use Cuban emigres, so Cubans who'd been unhappy with Castro, had fled Castro's Cuba for the US, and in particular for Florida, take them, train them, equip them, and send them back into Cuba to stage a coup d'etat and to overthrow Castro. Kennedy is briefed about this operation during the 1960 campaign, and when he becomes president, that is the first decision, big decision he has to make, is whether to give the go-ahead for an invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs.
The Bay of Pigs disaster was a military and diplomatic defeat for the new president.
If you're a Cuban, nonetheless, that was an invasion, or an attempted invasion. And many Cubans were not happy at all with Kennedy. There certainly would have been another faction there that would have wanted revenge against Kennedy. And Oswald, we are told, was a sympathizer towards the Cubans, although, some say, in the double agent idea, actually, he was anti-Cuba. But, these are the arguments that go round and round. But nonetheless, his Cuba always seems to come up somewhere down the line.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
As long as we fulfill our functions at a time of climax in the struggle for freedom, then I believe it is the business of the President of the United States to concern himself with the general welfare and the public interest. And if the people feel that it is not, then they should secure the services of a new President of the United States.
The Air Force One is 22 minutes behind schedule. The tires of the plane strikes tarmac in Carswell Base on the outskirts of Fort Worth, Texas. On the plane sits 46-year-old President John F. Kennedy and his wife, Jackie. They have visited the South to win friends. His popularity has been dented due to his ongoing support for civil rights. With the election a year away, Texas needed swaying to the new philosophy.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This afternoon, following a series of threats and defiant statements, the presence of Alabama National Guardsmen was required on the University of Alabama to carry out the final and unequivocal order of the United States District Court of the Northern District of Alabama. That order called for the admission of two clearly qualified young Alabama residents who happened to have been born Negro. That they were admitted peacefully on the campus is due in good measure to the conduct of the students of the University of Alabama who met their responsibilities in a constructive way. We preach freedom around the world, and we mean it. And we cherish our freedom here at home. But are we to say to the world, and much more importantly, to each other, that this is a land of the free, except for the Negroes, that we have no second-class citizens, except Negroes, that we have no class or caste system, no ghettos, no master race, except with respect to Negroes. Now the time has come for this nation to fulfill its promise.
I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation.
To some observers, the televised debates marked a turning point in the campaign, swinging the voters to Kennedy.
The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
11:30 p.m. In Ruth Paine's Irving home, 30 miles away, Lee Harvey Oswald lays beside his wife Marina. They had argued earlier. He tried to convince her to leave the Paine's house and move back with him in Dallas. She had refused and was somewhat irritated that her husband had arrived out of the blue without permission from Ruth. She found him emotional, often violent and careless. He also disliked Ruth, which seemed unjust considering she had helped him get a job at the Texas School Book Depository, where her neighbor's brother worked. "11:45 p.m. Jackie Kennedy unpacks her clothes, preparing for tomorrow. She and her husband are staying in a 3-room suite on the 8th floor of the Hotel Texas. The checkout time is at 12:30 p.m., though the couple know they would be leaving far earlier than that. Security surrounds the hotel, each taking shifts, to survey Suite 850.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy matters, and it matters still, because the world changed that day. And although it's a long time ago now, and the hope does seem to be that it will fade away into history and we'll stop worrying about it, if you go down the wider conspiracy view, that it wasn't just one man firing a gun, then it means that there were powers that existed back then that were willing to actually remove a leader by murder, who of course would therefore have influenced the world ever after. And although the individuals that might have been involved in setting up that assassination are, almost certainly not with us today, the bodies that they represented, the powers that they were fronting, clearly they do still exist. That is a concern, because it means that, the world has long been at the mercy of people willing to kill for what they want. and, you know, willing to try to muddy the waters ever since so that we can never quite identify them. So it matters because if you perpetrate a crime, we can do that lots of times, and then maybe the crimes get bigger, and therefore, you know, the consequences become graver for all of us, and inevitable.
"6:40 a.m. The alarm had gone off 10 minutes prior. Marina tells her husband, Lee, it's time to get up. Oswald kisses his 2 children and tells his wife he has left money on the bureau, explaining Marina can buy herself and the kids whatever they need. "7:20 a.m. Oswald leaves the house with a heavy brown bag and is driven to work by his neighbor, Wesley Frazier.
Now, you took a look at the package in the back seat. You asked him what it was. What did he say?
Well, as I was sitting down in the car, I glanced over my shoulder and I saw this package. And I asked him, I said, Lee, what's in the package? He said, you remember? He said, it's curtain rods. I said, oh, that's right. Nothing was ever said about the package anymore.
11:57 a.m. The president's motorcade makes its way through the outskirts of Dallas. In the car sits JFK, his wife Jackie, Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie Connally. The car is driven by Bill Greer. Jackie has her sunglasses on due to the blinding sun. The temperature is in the mid-70s. The president asks her to remove them as he thinks she looks a little aloof. Jackie places the sunglasses on her lap, occasionally putting them back on when public eyes were not on her.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
That you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
12:08 p.m. The press car belonging to journalist Robert McNeil passes a sign which reads, I hold you JFK and your blind socialism in complete contempt.
Was anything mentioned about the fact that the president was going to be coming by your building that day?
No, not anything. And we didn't do a lot of talking that morning going to work. It was just like any other morning. He rode to work with me. I rode out to Irving with me.
"12:09 p.m. Kennedy calls out to Bill Greer to stop. He has noticed a group of children carrying a large sign reading, Mr. President, please stop and shake our hand. Our neighbors said you wouldn't. The car is surrounded by screaming children, and the presidential security attempts to maintain crowd control. "12:16 p.m. Two of Oswald's colleagues, Harold Norman and Junior Jarman, are on the 5th floor of the book depository. It gives them a fantastic view of Dealey Plaza. Every member of staff seems excited to watch the president pass below them. A crowd is seen surging through Harwood Street. Bill Greer has slowed the car to a crawling pace. The police motorcyclist on Jackie's side is forced to drop back as Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent, hurries to cover her. It was known to him Jackie's dislike of crowds. Everywhere, people hang from windows, screaming and cheering, hoping to get a glimpse of the president. 12:20 p.m. The motorcade turns onto Main Street. Clint Hill gets onto the rear step of the car, despite being told not to. He is concerned Jackie could have easily been pulled from the vehicle by the crowds. 12:25 p.m. Dallas FBI Special Agent James Hosty is watching the motorcade pass by. He is shocked at how unprotected the president is. The crowds appear thinner at the lower end of the street, though Senator Yarborough is also concerned for safety. This part of town appears far more oppressive. "12:26 p.m. Abraham Zapruder is holding his 8mm Bell & Howell home movie camera. He stands on a concrete block around 4 meters from the ground. He hopes for a great view and a great opportunity to capture footage of the president. At 12:30 p.m., Nellie Connolly turns to President Kennedy and says, "You certainly can't say that the people of Dallas haven't given you a nice welcome." "No, you certainly can't," replies Kennedy as the car nears the Texas Book Depository. Clint Hill notices some windows are open in the depository. However, there have been many open windows along the drive, and so they are not a cause for action. The car moves downhill, away from the book depository. From 190 feet away sits Lee Harvey Oswald, peering through his telescopic sight. He is positioned on the 6th floor corner window of the depository. Lee squeezes the trigger and the bullet flies at 1,700 feet per second, directed at the president. Initially, people think it's a firecracker, or perhaps a car that backfired. The dial on reporter Travis Lynn's tape machine flickers as it picks up the gunshot. Sparks fly from the pavement behind the limousine. Lee Harvey has missed his first shot. Oswald fires again, and the bullet finds its target. It hits the president in the back, passing through his throat and hitting Governor Connolly, which passes through his chest and shatters a rib. It now appears the bullet has lodged itself in Connolly's left thigh. Kennedy is kept upright due to his back brace. Connolly screams, "My God, they are going to kill us all." JFK has a confused expression on his face. In the car behind, Secret Service agent Glenn Bennett screams, "He's hit." Schoolboy Amos Ruins stares at what appears like a pipe sticking out of the 6th floor window. He realizes it's a man holding a gun. The plaza echoes with the screams of onlookers, and the third bullet strikes its target in the head. Jackie Kennedy sees a piece of her husband's skull. The president, in a last thought, touches his head and topples onto his wife's lap. Clint Hill sprints towards Jackie, jumping onto the back of the car as it accelerates away from the plaza. As the car nears the underpass, Abraham Zapruder stops filming the scene.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
If Oswald was the lone gunman, there are strange oddities to the sequence of events. So we do know that Oswald was in the building that day. He was seen happily drinking Coke at about 12:15. Now, the assassination occurred at 12:30, but what's of note is that it was expected that the parade would go past at 12:15. Now, unless somebody had managed to tip Oswald off that it had been delayed, and it was delayed because they stopped to talk to more people than had been expected, you would have expected that Oswald would have been in place at 12:15. Rather than nonchalantly drinking Coke and just wandering around. You would think he'd want to be in place, and he wasn't. And somehow seemed to know that the parade would be there at 12:30, so that's an oddity.
Oswald conceals his rifle between 2 packing cases and heads downstairs.
And then after the shooting, he doesn't make a quick attempt to leave the building. Now, some believe he was only a decoy all along. that he didn't fire any shots, or if he did, he was mainly the decoy, the one that people hoped would be found and would then take the blame. Others believe that actually the original idea was to kill Oswald very quickly anyway. But it does seem strange that he didn't make an attempt to immediately leave the building. He was seen again calmly drinking, and an officer, a police officer, came in, because by now, of course, they were searching the building. He did confront Oswald, but a man with him working there said, no, he's fine, he's one of our employees, ignore him. And then Oswald quietly left the building.
A man is captured after he is reported to have killed a policeman. That man is a 24-year-old pro-Castro Texan who once sought Soviet citizenship. He is charged with murder. Meanwhile, the president had been rushed to a nearby hospital where life lingered as a waiting world prayed. A half hour later, he was dead, his life crushed like his wife's abandoned bouquet. A shocked nation.
Oswald had been a US Marine, and not a bad Marine, although that said he was court-martialed twice. He accidentally shot himself in the elbow on one occasion. He was fond of guns. He got to the position of marksman, which is not the best shooters, but, you know, not bad shooters. But then he left the Marines, and afterwards he went to live in the Soviet Union. He became a defector, or at least that's what we're told. Many believe that in fact he was double agent and that the defection was a setup, and that in fact all along he was working probably for the CIA. But nonetheless, he went to live in Russia. He and his wife Marina weren't happy there, and eventually they came back to the United States, and that's when he began to sort of get very concerned about what was going on in Cuba. Kennedy had become somebody that stood for everything that he didn't. And officially, at least, we're told that, you know, he just wanted to see this figure taken down, and so began his plot to kill him.
Almost 13 years after his death, President Kennedy is on the front cover of a major American magazine. Evidence of a sudden upsurge of interest in the facts surrounding his assassination. A steady stream of articles and reports deal with the subject. At least 2 major television reports are in the making. And this man, Mark Lane, the lawyer who for 12 years now has been asking for a fresh inquiry, suddenly finds himself in demand for his $2,000 a time lecture. He's always claimed that 5 bullets were fired, at least 2 of which came from the front, which means at least 2 gunmen and therefore a conspiracy.
Now, the autopsy, you know, supported ultimately the final Warren Commission's verdict that it was a shot only from behind. But there are many doubts about the autopsy photographs. Some believe that between the body of the president being taken to Parkland Hospital and then to where the autopsy took place, that the body was actually tampered with to conceal the evidence that the shot came from behind. So we know, for instance, that there was a shot that went through Kennedy's neck and exited here. But of course, was it an exit wound, or was it a bullet actually coming in again from the front? Some people believe they redressed the wounds to make it look like ultimately the shots had come from the other way around.
The square was the scene of stunned shock after the presidential car had raced off towards the hospital. People who had seen it all happen couldn't believe that it had happened. The horror, the grief, the disbelief everyone in Dealey Plaza felt that afternoon was reflected in the face and voice of one eyewitness.
He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man, that's all right, sir. You go ahead. As he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down.
2 things strike you when you come to Dallas a year later. The first is that there's nothing at all here in Dealey Plaza to denote the fact that one of the world's great men died here. There's no monument, there's not even a plaque. People used to put flowers down here, but they don't even do that anymore. And the second point, which is brought home when you talk to the people here in Dallas a year later, is that
Although this is the anniversary of President Kennedy's death, and no doubt it'll be marked throughout the world, here in Dallas, where it all happened, very few people feel that there's any point in commemorating this day as a special day.
So there are doubts as to whether some of the photographs we see are even showing Kennedy's head in its damaged state. But some say, well, it was Kennedy's head, but they basically pushed it around to make it look like the shot had come from behind and not from the front. But the minute that you say there's even the possibility that that shot might have come from the front, then you have to say there were other gunmen. And that's when you get into the whole realm of wondering, well, who were they? Where were they standing? And then you start to come to the evidence from some of the witnesses on the day who claimed they heard shots coming from the famous grassy knoll, which is a raised area of grass in Dealey Plaza, where the shooting took place with a fence. And many believe that one of the shooters, at least, and there are arguments about how many extra shooters there were, but that one of them was standing behind that fence. And that would make sense from what we see in the film. It would be very likely that one of the shots would have been fired from that place. It looks like there's a strong possibility that the shot came from the front.
The Warren Commission said one assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, fired 3 times, 1 miss, 1 which blew off the top of the president's head, and 1 which not only gave the president 2 wounds, but hit Governor John Connally as well. Lane calls the Warren Commission version of that shot their magic bullet theory.
Magic bullet theory. This is the way it works. Here's Lee Harvey Oswald up on the 6th floor of the book depository building. And here comes the president's limousine. As you see, right in front of the building, almost parks under Oswald's window. At this point, Oswald could take his rifle and drop it out the window, confident that he will hit somebody in that limousine. But does he? Does he fire? Oh, no. Being somewhat of a sport, Oswald waits until the car speeds into the distance. And then Oswald fires the first shot, and the bullet hits the president in the back of the neck, leaving behind a hole in his jacket 6 inches below his shoulder, leaving behind a hole in his shirt 6 inches below his shoulder, and leaving behind a hole in his back 6 inches below the shoulder. The bullet then exits from the president's throat, leaving behind a small wound of entrance.
That is not new, but this is the public showings of the famous Zapruder film, once the exclusive property of Time Life magazines, but since a copy was stolen, copied, and widely distributed. Lane and many others say that the direction of the white material from the president's head, the second shot, since the first is obscured on the film, proves he was shot from the front. For the first time, the film has been available for long and detailed inspection by lots of people, many of whom now doubt the official Warren Commission finding that the shot came from the rear and that the president's head jerking back is a massive neurological reaction. There was, they say, a conspiracy.
"12:36 p.m. The president's limousine comes to a halt by the emergency room entrance at the rear of Parkland Memorial Hospital. Jackie is cradling the head of her dead husband. Blood and bone is scattered over the car interior. The other passengers are in shock, overwhelmed with emotion. Secret Service agents surround the car with guns.
The assassin's aim is deadly.
Lee Harvey Oswald has recently picked up his jacket and a revolver at his boarding house.
But then you have the strangeness that Oswald went back, I think, to his home initially, and then he went out onto the streets, and then by then, a description had gone out of the man that the police were looking for. And it's unclear as to exactly why they thought Oswald suddenly was the killer, but nonetheless, that's the description that went round.
J.D. Tippett, a police patrolman, is driving and spots a man who matches the shooter's description from the book depository. He has located Oswald. Pulling up on the sidewalk, Tippett attempts to exchange words with Oswald, and Oswald retaliates, shooting Tippett 4 times in the head and stomach. Half a block away stands Helen Marker, a waitress. She watches, horrified at the shooting. The shots are heard and the police are en route to the location. 1:47 p.m. Eyewitnesses state Oswald has hidden inside the Texas Theater. The police hurry towards the location, desperate to arrest Oswald. At 1:50 p.m., the police locate Oswald and he attempts to shoot them. Officer Nick MacDonald, who had just been punched in the face by Oswald, jams the gun, catching the hammer and the primer with his hands. Oswald is hit from behind with the butt of a shotgun and arrested. Oswald demands for a lawyer, whilst an onlooker shouts, "Kill the president, will you?"
The local cinema where Oswald was cornered after killing a policeman soon after the assassination did a roaring trade. Now business is back to normal, with the next attraction setting an ironic note.
Interestingly, Oswald seems to have had an intimation that actually the police might have wanted to have killed him very, very quickly, which would, of course, have been more convenient for a lot of people. And there had already been a spate in that time period of police shooting people dead very quickly and then saying they were resisting arrest. And Oswald was quite canny. I think he suspected that because in the cinema, when they finally surrounded him, he shouted very loudly, "I am not resisting arrest, I am not resisting arrest," which meant that, of course, had they shot him dead at that point, they could have said, well, he wasn't resisting arrest. He said he wasn't. He shouted that to the people in the cinema. They heard that. So he was almost protecting himself there by doing that, just to make sure they couldn't take him out then and there.
Oswald is escorted out of the theater. A crowd of several hundred people surround the officers, each of them screaming obscenities at him. It is now common knowledge that the president was indeed killed.
Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark. Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please.
A man is captured after he is reported to have killed a policeman. That man is a 24-year-old pro-Castro Texan who once sought Soviet citizenship. He is charged with murder. Meanwhile, the president had been rushed to a nearby hospital where life lingered as a waiting world prayed. A half hour later, he was dead, his life crushed like his wife's abandoned bouquet.
Fly that rifle. Dispatches you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
You killed the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
Sir?
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, we can't hear you.
Okay.
November 24th, 1963. 11:10 a.m. Following a series of interrogations, Oswald awaits a transfer from the Dallas Police Headquarters to the Dallas County Jail. Outside the basement exit stands a crowd of 2,000 journalists and members of the public, awaiting Oswald's appearance.
There are many strange anomalies. I mean, also the minutes of what Oswald said when he was taken to the police station. We've seen the vaguest notes. There are no proper transcripts of what he said. In the brief sort of interviews that we heard to the media, he said, "I am just a patsy, I did not kill Kennedy." But, the transcripts you would have thought would have existed from those interviews, thus far never been released. So I think there are many doubts as to whether he was really the main gunman, even if he fired some of the shots. you know, I think it's very clear that there is another story there to be told.
Secret Service agent Forrest Sorrells is telling Captain Fritz that the transfer shouldn't be handled so publicly. Chief Curry even recommends using the armored truck as a decoy, whilst Oswald is transferred in an unmarked car, but no change in plan is made. During this time, Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner, is enraged at the death of John F. Kennedy. So much so that he is parked a block away from City Hall. In his pocket is a Colt Cobra, .38.
Now, Ruby owned a nightclub, it was a strip club, it was a sleazy world. He was connected to the mob. We are told, though, that he was so, you know, outraged by what Oswald had done that he just wanted to take revenge on behalf of the American people, and managed somehow to gain access to the back of the police station just as Oswald was being taken out.
11:21 a.m. Captain Fritz is taken aback by the scale of the crowd. Oswald is escorted through the basement of the jail. The crowd ignites with commotion. Detective Lavelle, who is handcuffed to Oswald, notices a man quickly approach from the sea of people.
Being let out by Captain Fritz. There is the prisoner. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. The detectives have their guns drawn.
Jack Ruby presses the barrel of his gun against Oswald's chest and fires point blank, a fatal shot.
The story at the time was he was just doing it, you know, because of his own personal motivations. And that then, of course, raised concerns because some wondered, was that it? Or was he removing Oswald because somebody didn't want Oswald's testimony to be heard? Now, it soon became clear that, in fact, Ruby had a lot of influence in the community. He certainly would have known people that might have enabled him to get to that part of the police station where the average person wouldn't have got inside of.
The dingy little strip club run by Jack Ruby, the man who killed the president's assassin, has been closed for nearly a year now. Ruby himself, under sentence of death, is in the county jail awaiting the hearing of his appeal.
Also, you then get the strangeness that follows when Ruby, as you know, he is now in jail, begins to make statements. And perhaps Ruby had been told, if you do this, you'll do your time, but then you'll be a big hero, everyone will love you, you'll be very rich, and you can, you know, write your story about it. But that it became clear once he was in captivity that he wasn't going to be released. And he then started to make statements. There's a famous press conference that he actually holds in the jail where he begins to drop hints that there was a wider conspiracy to kill Kennedy and that he knew more than he was letting on.
Ruby is quickly taken inside. He expresses his outrage as Oswald lies groaning beside him. "Do you think I'm going to let the man who shot our president get away with it?" Ruby shouts. A week later, the Warren Commission has begun in order to determine whether Oswald was the sole shooter. Accounts of over 522 witness statements were examined.
If we say that the intelligence services were involved in the killing of Kennedy, then we are effectively saying this was a coup d'etat. And certainly the accusations that Johnson was involved would very much make that a coup d'etat. The problem with that, and here are the ramifications for the future, are that if you have, you know, history changed by such an event, you can be very sure they've tried to do that since, albeit not quite so obviously. And there are big conspiracy theories since involving everything from 9/11 to various world events that believe that we see this kind of thing actually quite often. And again, the world is persuaded they are merely mad conspiracy theories. But I think the evidence is fairly strong that at the very least there was knowledge on the part of the intelligence services with the killing of Kennedy. And therefore we have to say that we have forever been in their clutches in the years since. And sadly, until somebody comes along that really is willing to shake that world up, we'll probably go on for a good while longer.
September 24th, 1964. The Warren Commission is presented to President Lyndon Johnson and discloses that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
The theories that there was more than one gunman, of course, are going to revolve around what was seen and heard on the day as much as what was seen in the film. So the grassy knoll, and if you see some of the images, you'll see quite a few people were sitting on the grass or standing there. A number of people claimed that they heard shots coming from over the fence. Some of them did try to testify this to the Warren Commission, which is, largely seen as a whitewash, the initial investigation. Interestingly, the Warren Commission said they would only consider evidence from people at the grassy knoll if their evidence concurred that there was only the lone gunman, Oswald.
What did you think of, in the subsequent years, all of the conspiracy theories and the ideas that we never got the full story? Do you think we did?
I think we did. I think the Warren Commission was right. I knew several of the senior lawyers who worked on the work. They were honorable, capable people. I think the most interesting thing that may come out of the release of these papers will be learning more about Oswald's trips to Cuba, to Mexico, to Russia. These are things that we know very little about. And I'm hoping if there's anything that comes out of these papers, it will be some information about that.
Jack Ruby was sentenced to death, however it was overturned on appeal, and instead he died after being diagnosed with cancer, the leading cause being a pulmonary embolism on January 3rd, 1967. The death of John F. Kennedy remains a scar in history. It is a murder surrounded with conspiracy, from the death of the president to the subsequent death of his shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald. Many believed there were more powers in play, though it seems we can never know for certain. What we do know is this event was a tragedy that will never be forgotten.
I am proud of a program and of a country that has helped to arm and feed and clothe millions of people who live on the front lines of freedom.
Harry Truman once said there are 14 or 15 million Americans who have the resources to have representatives in Washington to protect their interests. And that the interests of the great mass of the other people, 150 or 60 million, is the responsibility of the President of the United States, and I propose to fulfill it.